Okay, Chair, you're live on YouTube whenever you're ready.
Thanks very much, Scott. Hello and welcome to today's Economic Development, Environment and Infrastructure Scrutiny panel. My name is Brian Hubbard and I'm deputising for Councillor Saunders in his absence. Could members please be aware that today's meeting is being streamed live, so their conduct should reflect this. And before we start our busy agenda, I would also like to state that there's one notable change to our panel. I would like to welcome Councillor Stephen Walker, who is permanently replacing Councillor Garvey. So welcome to Councillor Walker. I hope that he enjoys our meetings. And could we please place on record our thanks to Councillor Garvey for the contributions he made whilst on this panel. So we'll go to item number 1, which is apologies for absence.
Yes, Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Saunders, Councillor Cooper and Councillor Lewis. Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 2, do we have any declarations of interest? No. Item 3, can we turn to the minutes of the last meeting held on the 16th of December 2020 and are on pages 3, 4 and 5 of our report. And are we happy to remove them? I'll take that as a yes, so thank you for that. Agenda item 4, which is the Middlesbrough Regeneration Post-COVID-19 Scrutiny Review. Today we are looking at the issue of broadband in Middlesbrough. And I would like to welcome Mr. Jason Leggett, City Manager at City Fibre, and his team to today's meeting. He will be giving a presentation on the company's business, plans for investment in Middlesbrough, and the post-COVID-19 recovery. And I would also like to welcome Mr. Craig Cowley from Middlesbrough Council, who is here just to watch the presentation. I understand it's about a 30-minute presentation, so could members please wait till the end if they've got any questions and comments. And with that, over to you, please, Mr. Leggett.
Well, thank you very much, Councillor. I think what I've got to do today is hopefully give you a good overview of our business and give you an insight into our exciting plans for Middlesbrough and the people of Middlesbrough. I hope following the 30-minute presentation or so, it might go on a few more minutes than that, but we'll give you an opportunity to answer questions, and obviously if there is anything that does come up during the presentation that you feel you do want to ask and you don't want to leave it to the end, please do. I don't mind stopping and responding to that. I have a number of colleagues joining me today. Apologies, they're not all on at the same time. They will be joining us in the next 30 minutes, but I will introduce them as we start the slide deck. I'll obviously make sure that they're on board and introduced at the appropriate point. Okay, so am I right in understanding that you've had a watch of a short video about City Fibre? Have you managed to do that?
No, that hasn't been presented as yet.
We're going to play the video now, Jason, if you're ready for us to do that.
That's really good of you. Thank you very much. So we'll start with that, if that's okay.
If you bear with me, Chair, I'll start sharing that now.
Smart technology now lies at the heart of almost everything we do, powering every corner of our economy and society. It's there when we're learning, meeting new people, sharing new experiences. As the applications, devices and services we use become smarter, the need to share more data at faster speeds grows ever higher, and network performance and reliability become ever more critical. That's why, at City Fibre, we're investing £4 billion to build the UK's most intelligent, software-defined, full fibre access network. A network to not only serve gigabit speeds to up to 8 million homes and businesses, but capable of 100 gigabits per second and beyond. Powering 5G, connecting everything from hospitals, schools, and stadiums to the myriad of IoT sensors that will realize smart city visions. But it's about more than just laying fiber. We're building a network that's always on, that can be upgraded at the click of a mouse, where problems can be fixed before they are noticed. One that allows our partners to define and control their own services and deliver a superior customer experience at the lowest cost per bit, per mile, per service. A network that stands ready for whatever the future brings. City Fibre, networks designed for the digital age.
Great. Thank you very much, Scott. I'm just going to share my slides, so just bear with me.
Just whilst we're waiting, can I also say Mr. Richard Horniman's also in attendance? Sorry for that, Richard, missing you out at the start.
Oh, it seems how you called me Mr. I'll forgive you, Brian.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm just having some slight technical difficulties. Just bear with me a second.
Hello, Susan. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, that's
We can
lovely.
hear you,
Okay.
thanks, Councillor.
Yeah, I had a problem. I don't know what was wrong with the connection, but anyway, I'm back now, so that's great. Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Okay, you should be able to see my slide deck now. Is everyone okay with that? Can you see it?
Yes.
Smashing. That's great. Thank you. So, I'm going to take a few minutes to talk you through this deck. Hopefully, it will add value to the video you've just seen. That's given you hopefully a snapshot, a 3-minute snapshot of what we're about as a business. To start with, I'll introduce myself. My name is Jason Leggett. As I was introduced, I'm the city manager for Tyneside and Wearside. My colleague Steph Carter-Smith, who has recently been appointed to the Middlesbrough role, is only in her third week. I apologise.
Morning, everyone.
So she's on the call today as well, just to introduce you to her. We are also joined on the call today. Thank you, Steph. Joined by a couple of colleagues of the team who are responsible for all of the hard work that's going to be entailed in the next few years in building the network. The first is Steve Driscoll, who's the area build manager responsible for building networks across all of the Northeast.
Good morning.
Thank you, Steve. And the also recently appointed, I think maybe about 4 or 5 months now, Peter, maybe a bit longer. Peter Miller, who's the city build manager for Middlesbrough, and he's going to be responsible for ultimately the build of Middlesbrough over the next 3 to 4 years. Morning. And then finally, thank you, Peter, and my colleague Selena Deeney, who's our regional marketing manager, and she's been working with me for over a year now at City Fibre and working up on some of the builds in Newcastle and the Northeast, and is also going to be looking after the market activity in Middlesbrough.
Morning.
Thanks, Selena. So, what are we are, who we are, and what are we about? So, hopefully, the video gave you an indication of what our agenda is. We are a competitive fibre builder. We are building new networks, brand new networks across the country, and we're investing a significant amount of money in doing that. I'm just sorry. I'm having problems seeing my own slides, I beg your pardon. There we go. So the mission we are on is a significant one. We have a significant project to deliver across the country. And this is a project that's not just in Middlesbrough or indeed a few cities in the north of the region, but we have a project that's of scale that's building in 60 plus cities across the UK and Scotland, the whole of Scotland and large portions of the UK. The overall investment we have for the project is £4 billion, and we are looking to create a scale of a project to reach over 8 million homes in the UK, and we're looking to do that within a 5-year basis. And that ultimately is about 30% of the UK currently. Now, that's what our current plan is. And if I talked to you 8 months ago, that 8 million figure would have been 5 million. And the investment figure was around 2.5 billion. So as you can see, the indication is that we are moving all the time as a business. As you all know, I'm sure, it's a real hot topic for the UK. Digital economy and indeed digital inclusion, connecting all homes in the UK to fibre, is a core ambition for all of the telecommunications networks. So our view is we're only going to go one way, and that will be upwards to connect more of the UK as we grow across the country. So in the last year, we've made some significant movements within our own business. So we actually celebrated our 10th anniversary last week, in fact. So we've been around for quite a while, but we've had various different guises. As a business, we've always been in the telecommunications sector, but we've been particularly looking in different areas. So we worked primarily when we started off in public sector networks and metro networks. In other words, connecting up large sites like hospitals and public sector organizations. We then moved into the wholesale sector, where we acquired a telecoms business, and we were then involved in working with SMEs and corporates across the country, helping them with their own connectivity. And then over a period of years, we then developed an ambition to get into this network, this fibre network building plan. And we raised money to do that. We did some early work with Sky and TalkTalk. We built a large test city project in York a number of years ago. And then fundamentally, we've then raised more money, as I indicated earlier, and we've then acquired, I suppose, a larger footprint across the UK. And we originally around 26 cities, as you can see on the left of this slide. And that was an ambitious target for us as a company, which was in relatively early stages of our life cycle. And some quite significant cities, including Edinburgh and Peterborough and or Leeds, as it were. And these were very ambitious, and the industry looks at us as a startup, as it were. And I think there was a little bit of surprise, shall we say, that we were making these kind of very bold, ambitious approaches. Beg your pardon. Thank you very much. Someone has just pointed out that the deck has not moved forward, so apologies for that. Just bear with me a second. Can you tell me if this deck is moving forward? Can everyone see it moving now?
Yes.
Yeah, it's moving.
Yes.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah.
So just referring back to those cities there. So you can see on the left, the initial 26 cities we launched. And then in March last year, we announced the next wave of cities, which clearly was where the additional kind of footprint of Middlesbrough and Gateshead and a number of other northeast cities appeared on our list. And then what we've done in recent months, particularly with an eye on the next stage of expansion, is to look at what we might be able to do working with government to not only focus on our city builds, but to understand how we can use those city builds as jump-off points to connect broader rural infrastructure to our fibre builds across the UK. And these are something that we're working on at the moment. So what is it we're actually offering? So I talked about being new networks, and it's very much that case. These are brand new networks built from scratch. So fundamentally what that means is that the team who will be talking to you in a minute about how they build that are obviously looking at the cities and towns for the first time. They're obviously looking at all of the existing infrastructure that's there, but our plan is to approach every new build and develop a plan, what we call a well-planned network. And what that means is we're going to put end-to-end fibre everywhere. So from the exchanges all the way to the individual premises, it will be full fibre. What that also means is if we plan effectively a well-planned network, what only does it doesn't just give us the opportunity to connect every single premise or home, but we also, because we're building this network to enable us to deliver services to homes, can enable us to connect all the mobile sites or 5G sites, all the business parks and businesses across the town itself, and of course, obviously, any public sector sites that want to benefit from the network infrastructure as well. And we have a team that works with local authorities and hospitals and primary care trusts around the country doing that work. Now, this investment obviously is a significant one. For Middlesbrough, it totals around £40 million. And we are making some design changes currently as we take a real close look at what we can physically do in Middlesbrough. And again, the point I made earlier about is always going up. We are looking where we can to maximise our reach in every town and city. So as we get into that understanding of what we can build, we're obviously trying to increase that investment. So currently, I think we've gone from about 70 to 80,000 homes as a target, and we're looking to get higher towards 90,000 homes. And that's obviously, expanding outside of the boundaries of Middlesbrough and into East Cleveland, into Grangetown, into South Bank and places like that. So this investment is a significant one for the town. And what we've done is we've worked with an organisation called Regeneris to look at this long-term investment value to the town. What does it actually fundamentally mean? And the data that they provided back to us was showing us ultimately, of course, we're going to make a direct investment with resources, with people, with creating jobs, etc., investing around £27 million in the cost of building that network. But also the longer term is what do you get back as a city or a town having had that investment in the infrastructure? And they've looked at this from a whole range of different lenses, as you can see there, and they're presenting a really strong and positive message as the value of this fibre. And I think as what we've been through over the last year and what we're still experiencing, we're all seeing the real value of connectivity now in our lives. And I think it's only going to continue to go in this direction. So what do we tell our consumers? What's the value of a full fibre solution over anything else they might have currently? Well, what most customers have these days, roughly about 92% in the UK, if they've got a super fast connection, roughly 30 megabits upwards, broadband solution, it will be a hybrid solution. It will have fibre at some point, but mostly copper. And that whether that's BT or whether that's Virgin or any other of the network owners, the solution is a hybrid one. As I've said earlier, this is a full fibre solution. So we can safely say to customers that by taking a network connection and working with one of our ISPs, and I'll be talking about those in a second, you can get up to 1,000 megabits per second. And that's a synchronous solution. So that's ultimately the ability to upload and download at similar speeds. So it's certainly not comparable to anything you might currently have with your infrastructure or your broadband services you're doing now. So all those other, as you see on the slide, there are also the kind of benefits come with that. It's all about bandwidth. It's all about the kind of consistency of service. One of the key messages that this slide doesn't really make, and it should do, is about the difference in quality of service. So one of the things that if you look at typically a network in the UK, that's a hybrid network with copper and fibre in it, and and some old cabinets or whatever it might be, you may have a fault of roughly between 8 and 14% on an annual basis on a network. And what we've done is analysis on fibre networks, not just in the UK, but in other parts of the world. And typically they will have between 1 and 2% faults. So there's a significant improvement in the quality of service that people will get. So as people rely more and more on digital infrastructure, that's where the quality aspect comes in. So just to finish off now, before I hand over to colleagues, the build of Middlesbrough is about to start. We began to mobilise in Q4 last year when we appointed Peter, as I said, And we have been working tirelessly in the recent weeks and months to build a team, and he'll tell you more about what we're doing, and Stephen will give you an overview of how we're doing that as we go forward. But our target is to launch in April, and then we'll have our first homes live roughly 3 to 6 months later. Now, and the build program, as you said, it should look to end midway through 2024. Now, when we build in a city, we work in partnership. Now, obviously, our investment is a full private sector investment. We're not looking for public sector support by way of funding or any kind of contribution. We see this as an investment that stands up on its own, and therefore we're quite happy to work in parallel with local partners like the council. And the way that we like to do it is be as collaborative and open and transparent as we possibly can. So we look to set up governance structures that meet the needs of the local authority, but also our own build. So we have a number of options. We can look at monthly, weekly, and quarterly governance sessions. They can be about reporting against metrics. They can be talking about the way that we're working with local authority teams. We can be feeding back on a regular basis of how the relationship's working and how it's working both ways, so that we can look at addressing any challenges or problems. We can support where we can to help. You know, when we come into a town and we start building a network from scratch, we accept that obviously the amount of work we're doing and the degree of work can have implications for the town. So where there are issues, we can support the local authority in those, whether that be through additional support or people or resources, or just looking to be cooperative and a partnership approach. We have a great deal of transparency in our work, so we're quite happy to share our progress, looking at maps and details and where we're going. We look to be very open with our build plans, with our build teams, to look at how we might co-invest, shall we say, in infrastructure. So if you guys are working in putting in new pavements or new road infrastructure in, we will try and work with you and schedule our build around that, and to look at opportunities to work together, so it reduces any kind of issues. And then ultimately we will obviously look at what else we can do. So, you know, where can we add value to the local authority? How can we work from a social aspect to add value? And we work with a kind of a single point of contact, and Craig's name is listed there. I know he's on the call, so he's one of the people that we've been working with up to now, but a broader range of people across the local authority who will be working with in the months and years to come. And this is all about demonstrating that we are actively trying to engage as a partner and to work on a long-term basis with the local authority over the next 4 years to deliver a really successful project. So I'll hand over to my colleagues, Stephen and Peter, who are going to tell you a little bit about the build program itself and how it unfolds. I'll happily take prompts to move slides along, gents, if you're happy for me to do that. Let me start by first introducing Stephen and let him tell you a little bit about his role and what he's doing, and then I suppose we can get into the detail with Peter about Middlesbrough.
Thanks, Jason. I think Peter has actually got to join another call, an internal call, so I can cover Peter's slides off as well. But hi, everybody. Pleased to meet you virtually, obviously. So, as Jason said, my role is actually the area build manager with responsibility for all of the cities in the North East region, as Jason mentioned before, that would come under Jason or Steph's remit. And I've been doing this is my 33rd year now, so hopefully by now we should be able to get this job done as quickly and as low impact as possible. Just to talk you through the stages of planning, of building a well-planned city. We first of all do what's known as a high-level design. The high-level design effectively looks at the whole geography of the city or town, and then subdivides it into areas called primary node locations, which are on average around 480 homes or premises, because they may include businesses. It can go slightly higher than that, where we've got large tower blocks, MDUs, etc. Once we've got that high level design, we then issue that to our design partner, The design partner will then go out and physically walk every single street of the city, and they will survey it for suitability. They'll look to optimize the design, and by that I mean we're now very much in a place where, for expedience and to minimise impact on the local communities, we're leveraging a lot of what's known as PIA, or pole infrastructure access, and that essentially is we utilise a lot of the existing open reach network, be that underground duct or overhead pole, to allow us to run our cables without the need for major excavation works in a location. That obviously really helps us to get by the homes as quickly as possible and reduce the impact. Okay, once we have the designs back, once we have the designs back for the primary node locations, we then look at the sequencing of the build across the city. So rather than it being a scattergun approach, it's very, very a case of evolution. We build out from where our fibre exchanges are located, and we do it in a contiguous manner. And by contiguous, I mean that it's always connectable back to our fibre exchange and therefore lightable, so that once people have had the experience of us building past them and seeing the progress we're making, as soon as possible after that, we're then able to offer the services across our various ISPs to the local communities. With regards to FTTP deployments, the provisional desktop planning is now complete. Low-level design is now underway and is going well, and is in quite an advanced stage. With, I think we've got 2 to 3 surveyors with our design partner currently in Middlesbrough, 5 days a week, and working through those. As it rightly suggests, we're now a 2 fibre exchange city, which is Sotheby Road, the Skippers Lane Industrial Estate, and then we've got Lytton Street, which is a small industrial estate closer to the town centre. That's going to allow us to build the city more effectively, because we have a natural boundary line of the railway line that comes in from Nunthorpe all the way into the town centre. So by having a fibre exchange on either side dramatically reduces any special engineering difficulties and unnecessary cost when we can put 2 fibre exchanges, and that allows us to serve everybody in Middlesbrough. And also we've now been able to extend that area out somewhat to gather up more homes. The connectivity is actually going to be comfortably in excess of 90,000 properties. It should be about 92,500 at current numbers and based on the current premise count and boundaries. Although as we move forward with a lot of cities, we can then increase our scope and obviously extend our boundaries to gather up any new developments, any new blocks of apartments or flats or anything like that that's happening as a city evolves over the life cycle of the build. And as it said, there is going to be about 900 kilometres of fibre cable deployed into the city. What you're looking at now is actually a high-level design, which, if you're looking at the boundary lines, i.e. the various random non-uniform lines, they're actually boundaries of primary node areas, and within each one of them, as I say, would be in the region on an average of 480 premises or homes, depending on the type of locality that we're in. Do you want to move on, Jason?
Yes, of course.
This is taking it slightly further because, as you can see now, we've got the little blue dots actually signify the locations of those primary node cabinets. And as we build out a city, we have to then work our way building in a continuous manner to ensure that we get fibre through those various cabinets, and that's done in the form of rings of fibre cable. The one difference with our network as opposed to many of our competitors is that we have a diverse network. So should there ever be an issue, we can feed our network in both what's known as east and west directions, which does give us a dramatically increased level of resilience should there ever be a strike by a digging machine or any other issues. We can easily repatch the network and go in an opposite direction and restore service quickly and without any drama.
These 2 slides are showing the 2 FEXs, aren't they, Steve?
Yeah, they're just basic. That's FEX 1. The natural boundary, as you can see on the right-hand side, is the railway line, and subsequently on this one, on the left-hand side, the green line is the railway line coming in from Nunthorpe all the way into Middlesbrough Centre. If we'd have had a single FEX design in that, it would have presented quite a significant number of engineering challenges, simply to navigate not only the railway, but obviously there's a beck that runs alongside it at certain locations. So early on in the process, I reviewed the city and went back to our business with a proposal to move to the 2FEX model, which gives a better level of service and coverage for the residents of Middlesbrough, but also it presents itself with a far more acceptable level of challenge in respect of engineering. As you can see on this is a very, very simplified drawing, but what it does show is that once we leave our fibre exchange and we get to a primary node, that's always underground, feeding the primary nodes, because that's what's known as our core network. They are much larger fibre cables. Once we get to the primary node, then there are a number of options that we have. We can feed our FTTP using, as it quite rightly says, DPA, which is duct pole access, or PIA, which is pole infrastructure access. They are absolutely the same thing. DPA simply lends itself more to where we're using Openreach's existing network all the way up to the house on underground fed estates, so we can actually get to the front wall of the premises ready for install. On the one where we go overhead, which is PIA, that then is a simple overhead install in exactly the same way as anybody would normally get a telephone line installed. And what we do, we get out to the poles, and then we can span along, and then we get to the customer premises with underground. We get from a primary node to what's known as a secondary node, which is a smaller cabinet, which then takes 48 premises as a maximum. And from there, we have individual 7mm buried tubes going to the curtilage of the front of the premises. Once people request an installation, we can then obviously blow a very small fibre through it and provide connectivity within about an hour or two of arriving on site. An installation will be completed by an engineer. This is just some examples of some of the sites that people may well encounter. Obviously on the left is our core feeder network, which is the large ducts, which the main cables go through. And then, as you can see, on the right-hand side, the photograph in the middle, which shows a narrow trench, which is where we would place our small 7mm tubes. They're the ones that go to the actual outside the premises. They require us to open far less ground up to be able to place them in there, and it allows us to move past the premises much more quickly. We are not at the stage where we're deploying mechanical trenching into Middlesbrough at the moment, but obviously that's something that can be explored with the council teams once we get work moving, and we can maybe put a demonstration on. And obviously the photo at the bottom is simply somebody testing light on a cable that is at a residential premises. So they're just some of the common sites that people will see as we build in the locality where they live. Construction process, it's quite straightforward and not overly complex in terms of the civils aspect. So site setups will obviously be in accordance and compliance with the Red Book and the Code of Practice. We regularly have both our own build assurance engineers employed by City Fibre and also the supervisors going around and performing regular, frequent and quite robust checks to ensure compliance. The laying of the ducts is either done through narrow trench then or far more of a standard 300mm trench, and that's open cut method. So we are actually opening ground rather than using thrust boring or other techniques. With that said, there are obviously occasions where directional drilling, etc., might be necessary just due to some challenges above ground, like very, very busy roads, etc., or newly reinstated ones. We can in certain circumstances utilise directional drilling. Reinstatement of the pavements is always in accordance with Hawk and the SROH. So the standards are checked, and once again, that's subject to some robust, frequent and widespread auditing across the whole area. We task our contractor with auditing as a minimum 50% of their gangs deployed on a weekly basis. And although our target for our build assurance engineers is slightly lower than that, we generally exceed it by some way, our target for audit, simply so that we know we're getting a very representative and value add sample from it, it does give us a clear picture then on the standard of work being undertaken, and ensure that we're leaving the pavements, the roads, the grass verges, and all of the locations where we work in the condition that we found them, which is one key factor in minimising impact on residents. When the construction work, i.e. civils, is finished in the street, it's very much a case of cabling teams work through very, very quickly then. The amount of the speed with which cable can go through the underground ducts it's very, very quick. We can put about 1 kilometre a day of cabling with a 3-man team. So it's very, very low impact, and the residents would likely not even notice it happening. Some work up poles will be using mechanical elevating work platforms to use, or cherry pickers to use the common name. But yeah, once the civils is done, the fibre installation is a very, very slick and quick process.
Very good. Steve, I think we've covered off a lot of the construction processes. I'm sure councillors will have questions if you can stay on the line for a few minutes.
Yes, no problem at all.
Community engagement we're going to move on to, and talk briefly about our marketing approach and working with stakeholders across the city. So I'll hand over to Selina.
Yeah, so as Jason mentioned in the beginning, I'm the regional market engagement, the type of stuff we do. Really essential that we keep all the residents kind of up to date with what's happening in their area. Also keep all of you guys up to date as well. So at the moment we're in the pre-build stage. So we have the stakeholder engagement. We also, the end of last year, we did our press release, our announcement that we were building in the town. So that ran really well. And we got quite a lot of coverage, quite a lot of positive kind of outcomes from that. And then as we move into the construction stage, I'll go into it in a little bit more detail, but that's when we do all the resident comms, site branding. And then throughout the builds, obviously, we'll keep, again, all the residents up to date with where we're building and stuff. And we'll also do more kind of sponsorship events, hopefully post-COVID, when we're allowed to get out and about again and kind of engage with the public. Jason, do you want to move on? So as I explained, it's really important for us to keep the residents up to date, to make sure they know exactly when we're coming and digging in their street. So a couple of weeks before, we have what we call a door knocking team. At the moment, because of COVID, we're not actually knocking on people's door, but we deliver a leaflet which explains about full fibre and that we're coming to the area soon. And then a week before we actually start building in the street, we'll hand deliver a letter to explain exactly when we're coming, what we might need to do. So, you know, we might need to request public to move the cars. Also on that letter, it's got frequently asked questions. It's got our one-line kind of customer service. So it gives the resident all the details, where to get in contact with us, that type of stuff. So that's kind of just an example of the letter. And then I think Steve mentioned this, but again, we have all site communication. So there'll be banners up. So it just make the resident aware that it is City Fibre digging in the street. Again, there's telephone numbers on there, website address, any way to get in contact. You know, sometimes we might be, you know, blocking someone's drive. So it just makes it really easy for the resident to know who we are and what we're doing. The wider community engagement. So like I said, hopefully we can get more activity like this up and running, but it's kind of like community events. I'll be doing kind of local media adverts. So it's kind of ongoing all the time, kind of just making the community aware of what's going on. Also how to pre-register on our website is a big thing, so that once the service is available to their home, they know, you know, they're kept informed of how they can actually sign up to an internet provider. A big thing as well, obviously with COVID, is like our commitment to safety. So all of our construction workers have key worker vests. They're given like what we call a toolbox talk, so they know exactly what they should be doing if the public approach them, that type of thing. So we also have kind of extra COVID kind of banner barriers up, you know, saying that we are, you know, we're allowed to work and we're maintaining social distancing, that type of thing. As I just mentioned before, we have what we call a one project number. So if any residents have any issues or any questions, we always advise them to ring this number and go through this kind of customer service, because everything's tracked. All the issues are kind of passed on to the build team, and no issue is shut down without it being resolved. It also means that we can go back to an issue, or it might be that, you know, a year down the line something crops up. So we kind of advise everyone, you know, we don't mind, you know, if you do need to contact us or anything like that, but we do kind of recommend that all residents try and use the one project where possible. And then just finally, it's kind of like working together with yourselves. We will be engaging every time we go into a new ward with the councillors in that ward to let them know exactly, you know, the build process, what's going to be happening. But if there is any ways that you can share, you know, on your social media or local, you've probably got more knowledge into local community newsletters that we can have access to. We're able to produce kind of adverts, copy, anything like that that needs to be shared. So yeah, it's just kind of, again, yeah, just working with yourselves to get the message out into the community and into the residents. So yeah, I'd appreciate your help in any of that. And then just to finish, just something that we are working on is a school engagement project called Fibre Fans. So as we build past schools in Middlesbrough, we will be trying to engage with them, because we've developed some free learning materials around 4 of the curriculum subjects, which kind of gives an insight of what full fibre is, what we're doing in the city. And so yeah, this is a project we're just working on, so it should be hopefully available for when we start build in Middlesbrough. So that's the type of stuff we do as well as just, you know, informing the residents. We want to get, you know, really involved in community activities and kind of give back as much as possible as well. And I think that's it, isn't it, Jason?
Thank you, Selena. Yeah, I'm sure there'll be some questions from councillors and people on the call. I'm going to draw that presentation to a close. Probably easier for me to end the slideshow and stop sharing, as it were, if that makes it easier. And just kind of, I suppose, from my perspective, I just want to thank colleagues for joining me from City Fibre today, but also thank you all for the opportunity to talk to you a little bit about what we're doing. Very happy to answer any questions that you may have. And just obviously Steve and Selena and I are on the call and could cover off hopefully all eventualities. But so over to you. If there's any thoughts or any questions, I'm very happy to answer.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for that. It was a extensive presentation, really enjoyable. It looks like exciting and much needed investment coming to Middlesbrough for a change. Is there any questions from members of the panel? And Councillor Branson.
Jason, thanks very much for that talk. Very interesting. One question I just wanted to clarify. You're installing this in 2 modes, underground and overground, as far as I understand.
Yes.
In the urban areas, is that predominantly underground, or is there a mix? So in a kind of residential area, can we expect that to be essentially underground or otherwise?
It depends very, very much on the local topography, if you like. So in general, with regards to overhead to underground, there's probably a ratio of around 70% overhead to 30% under the ground in previous cities. But that can change quite significantly depending on the age profile of the location where you're building. If, for instance, you're looking at a typical 60s type estate, for instance, lots of the cables are buried directly in ground, the existing cables from BT, the old GPO cables. So there we would be very much doing underground build. If it was an estate where there are poles that people can see out of the house, we will always endeavour to be using it and working along the street overhead. It just minimises impact. It's a much more effective and efficient deployment. But yeah, there is a ratio, generally around 70% overhead to 30% underground in a hybrid city, and Middlesbrough is a hybrid design.
Okay, thank you.
Is anybody else? Councillor Arundel.
Thank you, Chair. This is a subject that's come before scrutiny some years ago, the problems with broadband in the town. So I'm looking forward to see this completed. It's an amazing logistics exercise on behalf of your company, I've got to say. I'm very much impressed, and I hope you can keep within the timescale. I'm sure your history and what you've done in the past will give you the evidence that you can. So I'm very much welcoming this. So thank you very much, Jason.
Thank you, Councillor Arundel.
I think Mr. Cowley would like to ask a question.
Yeah, I would. Thanks very much, Chair. It's probably more for it is for Jason. Sorry. In terms of Stephen, in terms of the rollout and the hybrid nature of the scheme across Middlesbrough, if we are talking a 70-30 split in terms of overhead and underground network, how susceptible is the overhead cabling and network to disruption? In particular, whether if poles are knocked down for road traffic accidents, things like that. Does that bring a grid of the town down, or can it be kind of reconnected relatively quickly, like you would with Northern Power Grid, gas and electric and things like that?
Okay, so when we talk of overhead deployments, our core network is always underground. So with regards to taking out large parts of your town at one go, that wouldn't happen. The distribution network is very much where we've been to the primary node first, where if you remember back to the slide, that's when it would go overhead from. So any impact would be relatively low numbers of residents, but all the same, we still have maintenance call-outs for people to bring the network back up. That's in cases of physical damage. If you look at susceptibility to weather versus a copper network, there is almost no comparison, because water ingress has very, very little impact on optic fibre, whereas on copper it just causes corrosion and electrolyte reaction very, very quickly. So with regards to durability, there is vast improvement with fibre to copper, and with regards to risk to large areas of the city being knocked out due to overhead, no, it's only on distribution. So the numbers are relatively limited for any one cable of how many circuits are within their overhead. So it would be very, very localized.
Just to add to that, I think one of the real tangible examples that we had last year, I don't know if councillors remember, there was a significant flooding problem in Yorkshire, particularly York, suffered very badly from flooding. And for a period of, I think, about 2 weeks, it was underwater. And if you know anyone or you visited York during that time, there was pretty much, zero telecommunications available on the OpenReach network because of this issue that Steve mentioned there. But because we have a fibre network in there, all of the fibre customers were still able to operate all of their telecommunications. So there's a very real, tangible example of how the two technologies obviously are very different and work differently with regards to water ingress.
Thanks for that. I was just thinking more along the lines of moving forward as well over the next however many years with a shift to home working. There's going to be much more of a reliance on if there is an issue and if anything was susceptible. But I think you've covered that quite well. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Does anyone else wish to make a question? No. I would like to ask a question, please. Do you work in tandem with Middlesbrough Council and utility services when you undertake the work? because what we find is there's nothing more frustrating. We get a lot of complaints from residents is when they see a freshly resurfaced tarmac surface, and then 2 weeks later someone comes along and digs it up. So do you work in tandem with any works that takes place?
So I can answer that one, Jason. So absolutely, we would always look to work in a collaborative nature with the local authority. If we can get forward visibility of planned schemes, where road widening schemes, reinstatement schemes, resurfacing, all of those kind of pieces, I would instruct my city planner and city build manager to program advanced works. So even if that particular section wasn't due to be built for 2 years, if the council or local authority notifies they're going to be resurfacing and it could become section 58, we would just go and do the advanced works through that location and work collaboratively with the local authority. Likewise with other utilities, in other ones of my cities, we regularly do collaborative working. Either we work under the same set of permits and do our own works sort of more coordinated than you would if you're just working on your own. You can just work, without any constraints. Or we would simply agree that we would stand down for 2 days while people come in and do quite limited amounts of works that they might need to do in comparison to ours. And then we would remobilise onto that street once, say, the Water Board or Northern Gas Networks, etc., had finished their work. So we will always look to work in a collaborative and proactive fashion. The one thing that's hugely frustrating, I'm a resident in this town myself, so the one thing you don't want to see is somebody coming and disrupting your street, and then 4 weeks later somebody else coming and, for all apparently they're doing work in the exact same location, and you wonder why it can't be coordinated. We attempt wherever possible to collaborate if there are other schemes. If there's a quarterly coordination meeting, etc., we would absolutely want to contribute to that to discuss any potential opportunities to collaborate with the utilities or the council.
I think one of the things that just add to that is that Steve is, like you said, responsible for builds across the region, and his approach to what I've seen is exemplary in the sense that where we basically have the ambition, I think I'm right in saying, Steve, is that we envisage having a 6-month forward plan.
Yeah.
So that the vision of that and that foresight, as it were, gives council officers a real strength of knowledge on where we're going to be, and also gives the local authority the opportunity to look ahead of their planning as well and align with what we're doing. And just as examples, I'm aware of examples in other parts of the country where we're working in multiple cities at the moment where sometimes we will give our infrastructure, our ducts to the council as they're digging their own, putting their own pavements in or their own trenching. We've also done the opposite of that, where we've actually agreed with the council that we will do full reinstatement if they want something that replacing, such as pavements or whatever, that we'll do that. And obviously our contribution will be some of the construction costs. So there's a whole range of different ways of working, but the ultimate objective is to try and do it with minimal impact and to be as coordinated as possible with the local authority. So you're in safe pair of hands, I have to say, with Steve Driscoll.
Thank you.
Oh, that's excellent news, and I'm sure the people of Middlesbrough would appreciate that.
Sorry, could I just add to that, Chair? Just to
certainly.
kind of expand on that. I know that our colleagues in ECS have already been in touch with City Fibre and have liaised about the forward work planning and to make sure that everything kind of is as it should be, because we do have a new DFT permit street manager scheme in place. So we are kind of working with City Fibre to make sure that where we know we've got big pieces of work coming up in important areas of the town, that everything is coordinated as best as possible, because we really, as you said, don't want to effectively be digging up after we've just resurfaced a big new fancy scheme as part of the council's capital programme.
Yeah.
No, absolutely, and we obviously, I would hope that we could get the opportunity going forward once we're into build to have maybe even a monthly overview where we can present on the long range programme to show as it develops and evolves, and we've got it nailed down and it's, excuse the pun, in concrete. We can then come on a call once a month to show you a map that actually shows the developments of the build throughout the city and discuss any of the schemes. What we will do is the city build manager will be the single point of contact So if anybody's got schemes that they'd like to discuss with them to say, we're going to be working there, what's your plans? We can provide drawings, we'll attend joint site meetings and agree the most suitable and appropriate way to progress the works between the two parties.
That's great. Oh, we'd like to thank Mr. Leggett and his team for their attendance today. It's much appreciated. It's exciting times for Middlesbrough with that piece of news. And they're more than welcome to stay if they wish. I'm sure they've got much more busy things on their hands to attend to. But thank you for your attendance.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you, councillors. Goodbye.
Thank you. So with that, we move on to item 5. I see Mr. Muir Williams has joined us. He's going to do a presentation on the flood risk management. Mr. Muir Williams is the council's public right of waiver officer, and I'd like to invite him to provide an update on the flood risk management.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. As the Chair said, I am the Council's Public Rights of Way Officer. One of my hats. The other hat is I am the Officer for the Lee Local Flood Authority and the Risk Management Authority. I'm going to share a presentation. Hopefully it will work. And if you could hold any questions to the end, unless there's anything that you urgently want to ask, and then I'll try and go back over anything you might want to ask. So if you bear with me. Hopefully this is the right screen. Could you let me know if you can see? Can everyone see that?
Yes, we can see that. Thanks.
Brilliant. Okay. Right. So like I say, from a Lead Local Flood Authority point of view, in 2007, I think I might have recapped this before to other members, but if there's anyone new, I'm just going to recap quite quickly. But basically, what we had was in 2007, there were some major floods. And out of that, there was a report that was done by a PIT. And what that did was made a recommendation, number 1991, that the Local Flood Authority should report to the Scrutiny Committee on how the council is going to manage flood risk. And this will be done in an annual summary, basically. So if I can start by just explaining that, as you will all be aware, looking out your windows today in Middlesbrough, we have had an unprecedented amount of rain over the last couple of weeks and even over the last couple of years. And this is due to, as you all be aware, the world's weather patterns are changing. And basically, it's essential that we respond to the planning position ahead and increasing our resilience to changing demands of climate change. Scientists are basically indicating that we are going to get very warm summers, very wet winters, and sea levels will rise. The issue with warm summers is that it creates difficult weather conditions, and we get intense periods of heavy downpours. And what happens with that is the summer ground is baked, the water will go straight into the ground most of the time, and it will then go into the groundwater. What then happens is there's a lag time, and during the winter the groundwater then is quite high. We have a long periods of rain that can't get into the ground, so we have increased surface runoff, which then causes problems all over Middlesbrough. It goes directly into the drains if they can get into the drains, because quite often the drains are inundated, and so the water then just sits on the ground. As I'm sure you will have seen across the whole of Middlesbrough, we have areas where water is just sitting on the ground. So there is going to be a need in the future for the authorities and the public to adapt and prepare for these conditions. So in Middlesbrough, the flood risk. The Middlesbrough drainage system is extensive and complex. It's a multitude of different drains. We have open culverted watercourses. We have surface water and combined sewer systems. We have now in developments things called SUDs, which are sustainable urban drainage systems. So there's a multitude of different ways the water is transported to the main river. Parts of our highway drainage network dates back to the early 1900s, and little is currently known about its capacity and condition, and such is uncertain of how it will cope with this increased rainfall. Over the years, we have seen increased flooding from the highway drainage network due to reduced capacity with the road gullies and the drainage network. This is down to either the drains being not big enough to cope with the amount of water, or that we have got reduced capacity to maintain the gullies, so they are filling up with dirt, leaves and such like. Groundwater levels are rising, as I said before, and this is increasing the problem during the winter months. And so with everything, all of that combined, we are seeing a large issue in respect to drainage and how the water can get away. What this map is showing, and I appreciate it might not be as clear as it could be, is where the Environment Agency see surface water going when we have a 1 in 100 year event. Now, you'll see that there's some quite large areas of blue on the map. What the 1 in 100 year storm event means is that there is a percentage chance that every time it rains, we will have that biblical event, and the amount of water that falls and the system cannot cope with it. So a 1 in 100 year event doesn't mean it will happen every 100 years. We might see it happening today, tomorrow, 2 days next week, and then never again for 1,000 years. It's the percentage chance, and we are not able to predict that. But what we need to do is try and do everything we can to be resilient if that rain comes. Now, flooding can come from a variety of sources, as I've indicated before. Surface water runoff, ordinary water courses, and from surcharging sewers. Surface water flooding occurs when intense rainfall, often of short duration, is unable to penetrate the ground and enter drainage systems quickly enough, resulting in ponding and overland flows. An example of this would be on Beechwood, where there is a culvert that conveys all the water away from the actual Beechwood estate. All the fields to the south of Beechwood are inundated with water. The water flows across the actual fields into the estate. It goes directly into the drains if it can. If not, it's going into the actual culvert. The culvert then is under capacity. It can't cope. The drains then can't get the water into the culvert, so the then drains flood and the estate flood. And that is a prime example of the issues that we are having across Middlesbrough. The other issue is obviously with this being a very urban area, water cannot easily soak away due to the permeable surfaces. And so Middlesbrough is one of the worst areas in the Tees Valley, or one of the worst areas for flooding. So if I can move on to some of the work that we are carrying out, we work very closely with Northumbrian Water, and one of the things that we cover are things called integrated drainage studies. Middlesbrough has about 4 or 5 drainage areas that cover the whole of Middlesbrough. These are catchment areas where the water falls and drains into specific drains. As part of the work we do with the NWL, we undertake a stage 1 and a stage 2 study. A stage 1 study is basically where we look at any history of flooding. We look at a lot of paper documents and just have a look and see if there's anything that would indicate where there are some risk areas. We do look at any modelling that's out there, and we look at where the risks are. Out of that, there will be normally about 10 or 11 risk areas. And what we do is we look at the ones that have got the highest risk, and we probably take around 3 or 4 of them forwards to a stage 2 study. And that's where we have a lot more in-depth investigations, modelling done. And from that, we will get from the company, we will get what the problem is, how we could resolve the problem, what the economic problems are, and then also what the cost would be to resolve that solution. And basically, it's everything we need to apply for funding to the Environment Agency. Currently, Middlesbrough has one study on the go, which is in Middlesbrough East. The study, stage 1 study, was started in 2018, and that's now complete. And that has identified 10 flood risk areas. 3 of the areas were taken to a stage 2, and that stage 2 was started in 2019, as the slide says, and it's anticipated that's going to be finished in June 2021. And that, hopefully, like I say, will give us all the information that we can then apply to the Environment Agency for funding to resolve those flood risk areas. So, future planning. There are various different ways that funding is achieved, either through the Environment Agency and the money that they get from central government, or through local levy, which is money that is a levy placed on council tax. It's a percentage that that is paid. It goes into a pot, and then we can apply for that. And we can apply for that for money for doing studies, or we can apply for that for money to do actual physical works on the ground. And it's a fund that is for the Tees Valley and the wider Northeast. So the Environment Agency's 6-year programme for their funding they get from central government, we've just come to an end of a 6-year programme, which was called the medium-term plan. And under that, we had a number of schemes that were implemented, one of which I'll come on to later is Saltersgill and the flood scheme there. The other schemes that we got money for or applying for money for from there are Ormsby Hall area and also Cornwall Close. So we should be, Cornwall Close I'll come on to later, as well as Ormsby Hall. We have submitted updates for the next 6-year programme called the long-term plan. And as you can see from the slide, there are a number of schemes there, 9 in all, that will hopefully we'll be getting money for, but we definitely will be getting money to investigate the potential of the benefits from any flood schemes. The ones that are in stars are the ones that are within the East Middlesbrough study area. So basically, if I can move on to highway drainage. So we are continuing to investigate our highway drainage network. We undertake camera surveys and investigations to any reports that come in. We try and find out whether there is a reason why these are flooding. Quite often this is down to roots or to sediment build-up, which is in the main line. The council do undertake regular maintenance of our gullies as and when we can. And if there are reports of flooding, we go out there as we are today and resolving any immediate flooding issues. So developments and future resilience. We continue to work with the planning department to ensure that all new planning applications, where they are major planning applications, they are required to provide a flood risk assessment, and they also required to provide a drainage strategy. From that, they are required to keep all water that falls on their development up to the 1 in 100 years plus 40% for climate change on their site. And they are to do this by various different means, but we call them SUDs, Sustainable Urban Drainage Systems. And these can be anything from ponds to tanks to swales, which are scrapes next to the highway. And what this does is it collects the water on their site and slowly releases it into the drainage network at a lower rate, or no different to what would be falling on the ground as it is, which means our drainage network is not overwhelmed. Another piece of work that we've been working on to deal with resilience is working with the planning department on something called a green-blue infrastructure plan. It's only in draft. And this is basically looking at the whole of Middlesbrough, looking at what green spaces we've got and what benefits could be brought in those areas. But more importantly, we share the same interest. We need the green spaces to be able to hold water and undertake other such sort of schemes to hold water back. So we are looking at where we could utilize the same areas. So this can be anything from schools using rain gardens or having ponds in their areas, their grounds, so they hold their water back, to simple walkways, public rights of way, where there's areas and having scrapes along there that can hold water before it goes into the actual becks. Okay, so current schemes. I mentioned Saltersgill Fields before. I have gone at length before about the whole Saltersgill Field scheme, so I'm just going to give you a brief overview. So the scheme involved the creation of a series of ponds or scrapes between Saltersgill Road and the allotments, and then a bund, which is a mound of earth around the fields between the allotments and Martin Road. It was envisaged that this would protect properties of 306, with and the scheme was proposed to be completed in 2019. As you'll be aware, we've had unprecedented amounts of rainfall over the last couple of years. This has delayed the scheme, but I'm glad to say we have finished the construction works, and we came in on budget with additional benefits, which was pretty good going, considering the rainfall and the delays and COVID. So this is a slide I've shown before, and if I can draw your attention, I'm not sure whether you can see my pointer, but we have in this area, which is between Saltersgill and the allotments, these are the ponds. So we have this large pond that is collecting the water that is flowing across the fields that's to the south. This then actually flows into this scrape, and then this one flows into the area here, which is a pond. These first two are designed to drain down and only have a flow channel that flows through the bottom of them. This one here is designed to actually hold the water to about a metre, to then slowly release it into the actual beck or ditch that runs along this side of the allotment, which then goes into the culvert, which is marked by this blue circle, which then flows underneath Beechwood. And that is designed to slow the water from getting into the culvert. So during storm events, the culvert can have the water from the drains on the estate getting into the culvert and away before the water from overland flow comes into the culvert. During the process, it was pointed out and identified by the EA that there was a second flow which was coming through Easterside, and this was coming down the roads because of the fact that the drains can't always cope. And what this does then is it comes out in this corner of Easterside and then came across and flooded the actual allotment and got into the culvert and caused us a problem like this side does. So what's been done is a bund, and you can't quite see it, but there's a red line that comes around the fields. Now this is basically deflecting this flow from the beck that runs down the side of this red line into the actual fields that are all here, and it basically holds the water back and then gradually releases that into the actual beck, which then flows through the allotments and into the culvert. As I say, that work's now been completed, and what I've done is I've got a series of photos. Now this one, I hope you can see them okay. This is taken from roughly about 2018, and you can see the fields that were and how it was laid out before. And then this one, you can see the actual ponds and the scrapes and the actual mound that comes round. So it is on quite a large scale, but it is taking a large amount of water. And I'm pleased to say it does appear to be working based on the current rainfall. What I've got now is a series of shots just showing before and after. So this is the actual pond that's going to hold the metre high amount of water. The outfall is in this corner, and it's just just at the bottom of where the actual outfall is, so it's not too deep. This is over near Martin Road, and this is where we've got the bund that's been put in, and this is actually working because we've got water that's being held back, and this is the amount of water that was getting behind the bund that is there now, and it was obviously making the paths unusable. So the actual water is being held back. What I would say is any water that falls on ground and the water's saturated, it will pond and pool where you have low points. So if this is falling directly on the ground behind the bund, then the water will collect there. And there's very little that we can do about that because we can't control where the water falls. One of the other things I mentioned is the additional benefits that we've been able to provide as part of the scheme, which still has got us on budget. Now, this is the overflow car park on Saltersgill. And before, we had no barrier around the car park. And what was happening, we were having vehicles and motorbikes that were getting on, tearing across the fields and being burnt out. So now we have a knee rail that has gone round, and this is preventing them from getting on from this access point. The other thing that we quickly recognised while talking to councillors is that there was a lot of school kids that were coming from the Beechwood end across the fields to the schools on Saltersgill, and quite often they were taking, as everyone does, the shortest route. And with us putting the actual ponds in, we thought it would be good to put in a surface path that they could utilise. So this was additional benefit that was able to be put in. So that's Saltersgill. We'll go on to Cornwall Close now, which is another scheme that was a part of the medium-term plan. We have actually managed to get the funding for this, and this was looking at a very small number of properties, maybe 2 or 3, and a very specific field, which was quite a slope, and the water that was falling on this field was running off and directly into the back of the properties. And what we've managed to do, as I say, is get the funding for this. Planning permission will be submitted shortly, and construction should start later this year. It's a very small scheme, but that's the flow path as per the EA's surface water mapping. And you can just see the couple of properties that it actually floods. And it was flooded a couple of years ago. And what we are doing there is it's a very small, again, bund across what is a very small valley. We've got a pipe that's coming out of the bund. There's no throttle that's going to be put on. There's no plate, no restriction. It's purely the amount of water and the size of the pipe that will throttle it down. And what that does is just allow the water to be held back and slowly released. The water then flows across the land, hits a wall, or I think it's actually paving stones that are put on their end, and it deflects the water around where this footpath is. There's a series of drains in here, and it flows down out into Cornwall Close where there's a highway drain. So that's a very small scheme compared to Saltersgill, but it is necessary for those 2 properties. The other one that is quite a high impact scheme is Ormsby High Street. There is, as you'll be aware, there is the National Trust Ormsby Hall, and what we've got there is we've got a large amount of farmland where the water is flowing across the farmland when it's saturated, flowing through the woodlands and then coming out onto the road. It then is flowing down the road, and at the low point it's collecting, and then as it rises it's flowing into the beck, and I have a map to show you in a second. So there is 2 issues that are here. One is the overland flow, and the other one is the actual beck itself and the culvert that runs under the road. Now there's a trash screen on there, and the EA have recently increased the size of the trash screen so that hopefully that will allow the water to flow through and get away quicker. And that means that then it will hopefully enable the highway drains to cope with the water coming through. But there is still a need to look at the overland flow. As you can see from the bottom point, originally it was covering 18 properties. However, following the lessons we've learned from Salters Gill, there was a second flow that was identified, and now that is potentially looking at protecting 100 homes. So, you know, a lot more properties, and we always try and look at maximising the number of properties that we can protect. It not only gets us more funding, but we have a target for the northeast that the government sets, and we need to help contribute to that target and also better protect the residents of Middlesbrough. So this is showing the two flows. The first one that we identified was this one here, that comes out onto Ladgate Lane and then causes flooding further down near to these properties, and there is a club under here. Also, the beck that flows down here is showing that the water in certain periods cannot get through the culvert quick enough, so it then backs up and then floods this area. The other flow that we identified was over near Ormsby Road, and this then is flowing through the back of the properties and down towards the town. So that is where the additional properties are coming from. So this one again, very simple idea is to have some form of earth bund towards the fields of the Ormsby Hall, either into the fields or perhaps on the edge of the woods, but this is down to negotiations with the National Trust. This will hold the water back, and then the water will be gradually released again so that it flows across and either into the beck or out into the natural drainage ditch that runs through the woodland, which then drains into the culvert and then away down Ormsby Beck, down Middle Beck. The other additional benefits that we're going to do is to replace the wall that runs in front of these properties with a flood protection wall, and it will have floodgates. We are also, one of the problems that happens is the water runs down the high street and then down the side of the club here. So we are looking to facilitate that natural route by raising the walkway there, so the water can, in extreme events, flow under the walkway and then back into the beck. So that's Ormsby. The other major one that has happening over the last 6-7 months is a scheme that the Environment Agency are leading on Martin Westbeck. The reason why there is a split is because the Environment Agency manage main rivers, which are Martin Westbeck, Middle Beck and Ormsby Beck. And the council manages minor watercourses, so that's the other becks, Bluebell Beck and such like, and also any drainage ditches, any culverted watercourses, of which there are many within Middlesbrough. And so that's why there's a split. So the Environment Agency have been working quite hard on trying to resolve issues of flooding on Martin Westbeck. In particular, trying to reduce the amount of water that is coming downstream, so that the lower stream culverts that go from Albert Park, and I'll just put my pointer on here, from Albert Park through to the A66 and out to the River Tees can cope. I think you'll be aware that in past years there has been issues of flooding in that area. So there's several things that they have been doing, one of which is they identified a flow of water coming across Albert Park. And so what they have done, and I appreciate it is difficult to see from this plan, but they have created a series of bunds in this area, which is just here, so that holds the water and then gradually releases it into the drainage network, which then flow down into the culvert. They have also raised the height of the wall that runs down the road here, so that the actual beck that actually runs down the right-hand side of the lake, in extreme events, can overflow. The lake here is also utilised as a storage area. So the idea is that the wall allows the beck to flood over and into the actual Albert Park Lake, and then gradually release the water. Another thing that they've managed to do is to improve the trash screen that's at the Albert Park northeast end. And what they've done here is, in the past, the trash screen, being a typical flat screen, is quite often a lot of rubbish is pushed downstream, collects at the actual grill, and then backs up and acts as a dam. Now, what they've done is they've put something called a lateral screen in. So all the water pushes the rubbish forwards. The water then hits that, backs up, but because you've got a screen to the side, the water then drops into there and bypasses the rubbish and gives enough time for the council and the EA to get down and remove that rubbish. But it doesn't prevent the water from flowing away, which has been a huge problem in the past. Another works that they've been doing is near to Borough Road, where there was a number of flood walls that were quite low, and they've recognised the amount of water, the water levels reach higher than the actual flood walls. So that's another area where they have improved the actual flood walls and the actual channel there. The other aspect they have done is upstream, near to Nature's World. And what they've done here is, and I hope you can see this, it's just in this corner here. I hope I can zoom in. There you are. What they've done is they have created a series of bunds, again, which just gradually holds the water back and then releases the water gradually into the beck, so that the water is held upstream rather than being allowed to come downstream, and if there's any blockages further down at any of the bridges or grills, for that to be flooding. The two bunds they have created, I do appreciate the shows 3 here. This is a slightly earlier plan. There is one bund that has been constructed in this area just here, to the northeast of the Ackham Cemetery, and there is one bund that has been built in the actual municipal golf course land. Both of them are doing the same job, which is to hold water back from the water courses that flow across and into the main beck. So that is all of the scheme that the EA are doing and that Middlesbrough Council are currently doing. And I'm happy to take any questions. Just going to check I've not got another slide. Oh, right, there you are. Right, so I just finish on this one and I'll take your question, Councillor Arundel. So as I mentioned, the scheme was started about 6 or 8 months ago. It's on progress to finish in March 2021. Albert Park new linear trash screen is nearly complete and will be finished in mid-January. Borough Road walls are almost complete. Newham Bund earthworks are well on the way to be completed, and they have managed to make some efficiency savings by utilising some materials that the council had on their land after creating a suds pond for the cemetery. Thank you very much. Any questions?
For that, Mr. Muir.
No problem.
Mr. Muir Williams. So, Councillor Arundel, would you like to ask a question? Yep, Councillor Arundel.
Yeah, for me.
Certainly.
Right, there's a couple of questions, if you don't mind, actually.
Yep.
Presentation there, Stuart, and I didn't recognise you, by the way, because you've grown quite a growth around you anyway. There's a huge hole in the ground that's been created near Sandy Flats, near Nature's World, as you've said, and it looks like that works is nearing completion. They're looking to move off the site, and I'm a bit worried about that, actually, a bit about that great hole in the ground, which doesn't look to me. It looks like a ploughed field, and it's not the sort of surface I would have thought that you would expect on a suds. I could be completely wrong, I don't know, and I know that tractors suffered terribly with the wet weather, and I've got an absolutely unbelievable job to try and tidy up as they go, because the state of the whole area along that footpath near Nature World is just like something out of the First World War. So I don't know if you've been up there recently, Stuart, But I'm not quite convinced that's working, that scheme, because that huge hole in the ground, there's more water in my mate's back garden than is in that hole in the ground. I just can't understand that. If that's finished, or appears to be finished, and they're looking to move off site, why is it empty of water? So that's one thing. The second thing is regarding road gullies around the town. I've actually had a go to our environment department, which I know have been struggling with finances for quite a number of years, about the number of road gullies which are choked. I haven't seen a road gully cleaner since I can't remember when. Certainly in the last 5 years, I've never seen one. Now, whether it's a good thing that they're blocked, insofar as it stops water flying through the system and causing flooding or not, I don't know. I'm not knowledgeable enough about that, but it seems to me the so-called maintenance program hasn't been done at all, because, as I say, I've never seen one for donkey's years, a road gully, and a number of gullies that I see choked on, even on main roads, on Acklam Road and what have you. So that's that one. And regarding the Salters Gill, you said you put an e-rail, and I'm sure it's well intended to stop the bikers and what have you chewing the grass up, but I'll have to tell you, they're still doing it, because I walked past there last week on a walk with a dog on a Saturday with a friend, and there they were with quad bikes chewing it up, to the point where they actually pulled trees out which had just been planted so it could get back on and off the field. So there are areas that I've had concern, Stuart, and I hope you can answer some of them, please.
Yes, Councillor. If I can take Salters Gill first, if that's okay. Salters Gill, I am aware of a number of issues. The reason I mentioned that we'd done pretty well to come on budget was we had to put security on Salters Gill to protect the machinery and the site for the length of the project, which increased our costs considerably. We have suffered from motorbikes there. The knee rail I mentioned, obviously around the car park, was more to stop vehicles that were being driven across the fields to the northeast, excuse me, from Low Lane, across and onto the Salters Gill fields. The motorbikes, it's one of the things we cannot stop. We are limited to how we can try and stop them, other than putting up knee rail around the whole of the town. But on here, there's so many access points. The wood, they come through the wood. It was impossible for us to put knee rail around the whole of the site. We did try and put knee rail around the pond that was there because we thought that would be beneficial. However, within a day, it had all been ripped out. So there are a number of access points that we have tried to block off, and we've achieved that, I believe, for vehicles. But I was there one day when I saw a truck that came along, and they had one of these lowered tailgate, and all it did was reverse to the actual knee rail, lower that down, and they took the quad bike off. They'll get on if they want to get on, but hopefully we're trying to stop vehicles like cars that will churn up the suds and make them a high maintenance problem rather than perhaps the motorbikes. Is that okay? So your second one, or second one was the Martin Westbeck, is that right? Your second one?
Yes, Stuart. It's actually I've talked to the contractors, and it's a minor beck that runs into, I've been told, that runs into Martin Westbeck, where that great huge hole to contain water is being formed to catch, not actually the Martin Westbeck itself. But as I say to you, it looks to me like it's like a ploughed field, and I can't understand, after all the rain we've had, and I went and walked past it on Saturday. There was, as I say, there was more water in my mate's back garden, and I just don't understand that when it looks to me at the point where they're looking to leave the site. Now,
okay,
I could be completely ignorant on this, but it concerns me. As I say, the surface, like you say, it's like a ploughed field, and that's not something I would have expected. I would have expected the land to be graded.
Okay, Councillor.
Tell me otherwise. I don't know.
Yeah.
It just seems strange to me.
Right. So if I can answer that one then. So what you have is you have several different methods, as I mentioned before, of holding water back, suds features. You have ponds, you have scrapes, and you have bunds. So the bunds, which are just mounds, that don't necessarily go round all sides, all they do is they stop the water from flowing across and hold it back to a point where the water can then escape out of the pipes that have been put in. So there were two areas there. There is one which is near to the actual cemetery, which the council undertook, and that is quite a large hole, for want of a better word, a pond, and the water will collect in there and it will fill up, and then it will get to a certain point and then it will discharge. The other one holds the water back but will constantly discharge. And what I probably failed to mention is, when we look at these, this is about forward planning, resilience, and we're talking about storm events that you could be described as biblical. You know, this is really, really heavy downpours in a short space of time. The ground, the drainage cannot cope with the amount of water, so it all flows across. We don't have, even though it seems like that, we haven't got those sort of events at the moment. So the water won't be collecting there if the drain that comes out the other end can cope with the amount of water that is going through. So that's why you might not be seeing the water collecting there. Saltersgill, on the other hand, there are a number of low points on the fields, and the discharge point is completely the other end to where those low points are. And so to deal with them, we've had to put in some French drains, basically scrapes in the ground, which you put stone in and cover over with soil, and the water will collect into there and then hopefully slowly drain away. But as I mentioned, if the groundwater level is high, if we've got persistent rainfall, these sort of things fill up and then they can't get away. But they're the differences. So ponds will hold the water, whereas bunds will only hold the water back when we have extreme weather. Otherwise, it will just flow through normally if it can get away. Is that okay, Councillor?
So, correct me if I'm wrong here, but what you were saying is that huge hole in the ground, which BAM Nuttall have been on with for months and months, is only there for the once in 100 years event. It's not activated until such a time as we get that event, and it will be empty of water until that happens. Is that what you're trying to say?
That is my understanding of how these schemes work. Yes. So they have them. We have to build for what the modelling is showing. So, for example, I come back to Saltersgill. Saltersgill, the bund that goes around the fields near to Martin Road, has been built to reservoir standards, because if that was to fill up, it could be 1.5 meters depth of water across the whole of that field. And what happens, like I say, is that is only happening where the discharge pipes that are throttled down to hold the water back, that could be 400 mil pipes, the amount of water, and it sounds ridiculous when you say the amount of water getting through those pipes, but the amount of water is held, it can't get through quick enough, so it all backs up. And that is extreme events. But as you were seeing from weather reports and news reports, we do have those events. They're once, maybe sometimes once in a lifetime, but they might not be. They might be every other week in a summer or winter. So we cannot predict when. All we can do is measure and model what would happen if they came about, how many properties they would affect, and then and we'll do everything we need to do to be resilient and make sure that happens. Is that okay?
Yeah, can I just say though that when BAM Nuttall move off the site, can you make sure that through myself that they leave the place as they found it when they turned up? And I know they've had a horrendous time with the weather, but there's been a lot of areas chewed up. They've done their best to put these mats down, but it haven't worked. What I don't want is for them to leave the site and leave a complete mess behind them. So I hope you're on side with me to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Yes, I will do that. I mean, I am aware of several reports that have come in. The path between the golf club and Nature's World actually is temporarily closed, and they are allowing people to use it as and when. But yes, I will keep an eye on that. I will be holding them to account and making sure that they put it back as they found it.
Right, thanks very much for that. Thanks for that, Councillor Arundel. Councillor Branson.
Thank you. Good morning, Stuart.
Good morning.
You no doubt will be aware that we've had problems of flooding in Colbingham, specifically in those properties which are right on the southern boundary. I'm thinking Comfrey at the moment, Comfrey Manor. And one of the issues is that you've got what is basically farmers' fields draining. I think the water just coming straight off them because the ground is super saturated. You're probably also aware of the fact that there are plans ultimately to build houses on much of that area. My main concern is if we do build houses there and we don't build proper flood defences, that we're going to make the problem worse because you haven't got the ability to absorb the water. And I think we really need to be thinking now about what can we do in that area of Colby-Newham to alleviate the problem of flooding. That may include doing what you've been doing elsewhere, providing a drainage area, a pond that can collect water. It may be reforestation. I'm not sure whether, in fact, that has a positive effect. I seem to think it does. Please tell me if I'm wrong. That if you plant trees, that also absorbs water. But whichever way, I think we need to do this before we start doing any construction work in the south of Colbingham. Otherwise, all we're going to do is just make the situation worse. And I just wondered what your view was on that.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I am aware of the recent surface water flooding that's happening in that area. One of the things that we do is we keep an eye out for any flooding. When we do have a storm event, we will look afterwards at where all the issues have been. And with our new GIS mapping, we are starting to map where all these problems are and what's been affected. What I would say is one thing that we do look at, even though it is inconvenient, and I can look out my window now and see that my back garden is completely flooded, despite being a flooding officer. And what we do is we look and see what is being flooded. Roads, we're happy that roads flood during a storm event, as long as that water gets away, because we're talking about short periods of intense rainfall. Some roads are designed to flood and then the water gets away. Some roads are acting as a storage area because the drainage on site, they cannot prevent flooding in all cases, and water will, during a 1 in a 200 year storm event, will get out. And it's just about where that water goes. Developers have to ensure that 1 in 100 year plus 40 plus 10 for urban creep is managed on site effectively. And as the Lee Local Flood Authority, we comment on all planning applications and we hold them to account, and we make sure that they prove to my satisfaction and the council's satisfaction that what they are designing works. But as I say, the 1 in 200 year storm event, they do not have to manage because it's just it's unprecedented amounts of water. They cannot do that. This area, obviously, once we've had this storm over and done with, or this season of storms, we will look at the area. We will look at what flood events have happened, what routes have happened, and what's been flooded. And we will look where we can to address those issues. It may be that, as I mentioned before, we've got a blue-green infrastructure plan that is looking at areas which existed, where planning and development have happened in the past. We might be looking at how we can resolve issues there, because we cannot go back to developers retrospectively and ask them to put in flood defences. That has to be done now, as and when they develop it. So we do look at all developments, and obviously some of the schemes that we've put forwards, what we've done is looked at the surface water mapping and looked at the numbers of properties that are potentially at risk. Some areas aren't at risk. So for example, the area you mentioned may not have shown that it's at risk. And so because of that, it's not something on our radar until there is an event. And one of the problems we have at the moment is the summer, we had a very wet summer. And because of that, the groundwater now is full, the water can't get away. And because Middlesbrough, like a lot of other areas around us, have got clay, the water just cannot get away and it sits on the surface, and any slight rainfall, the water runs off. Now, I appreciate in that area, I haven't seen that as an issue in the past. I am aware that there's water that collects down the side of the Comfrey Manor, but it's not been as bad as it has been recently. But I will look into that. Once the recent storm events happened, we will look into what we can do about that.
Yes, I'd be very grateful if you could do that and get back to me, Stuart, because I know that that's of concern to a number of residents. And I have already, of course, put in a one-stop in that request. So Mr. McNally, I think, has got back to me on that. Jimmy McNally from Highways, I think.
Jimmy McCann.
McCann, I'm sorry, Jim McCann.
Yeah.
McCann, yeah. He's been, and I know I've had a reply from him on this.
NWL have also been out there because there is a sewer that runs in the fields. So they have been out, they've recognised and they've identified that it's not the sewer that is surcharging. So it is surface water. So we will have a look at that and I will come back to you.
If you would. Thanks very much.
Yeah, no problem.
Right. Thank you for that report, Mr. Muir Williams. I'm sure it's been noted. And thanks for the questions from the panel. You're more than welcome to stay on if you wish, but we will move on.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for your time. So we'll move on to item 6, which is the review of the pest control. The terms of reference, they're on page 7. There's 3. I'm sure you've seen them in the report. Myself and Councillor Saunders has formed a task and finish group to gather information from other local neighbouring councils about their pest control services. So we've actually sent some emails to try and gather some information for the next meeting. So hopefully we'll have that to bring to the next meeting. Due to the fact that the council doesn't provide a service to residents, the council doesn't hold any records of the service requests. So we need to try to establish the extent of the pest control issues in Middlesbrough. So I'd like to ask members if they could forward any evidence of requests or complaints from their residents about pest issues to Sue, me, or the chair. And then any recommendations as well would be greatly received to Sue. And we'll hopefully have a report ready for the next meeting. Item 7, there's a new date for the next meeting, which is Tuesday, the 23rd of February at 10:30 a.m. I'd be grateful if you could make a note of that change. Item 8 is the overview and scrutiny board update. There were 2 meetings since the last meeting that we presided over. It was the 18th of December 2020. There were 2 call-ins. The disposal of Nunthorpe Grange Farm, which was adjourned, but will reconvene on the 29th of January, and the residual waste collections. This has now been abandoned, as this will not be rescheduled, as the executive decision was overturned, and therefore the 2 call-ins are no longer required. On the 14th of January 2021, the meeting was about Middlesbrough Council's response to COVID-19. There was an executive member update from Councillor Dorothy Davison, who was the executive member for adult service, adult care and public health. There was an update on the strategic plan and the Q2 outturn report. Also, the Teesside Safeguarding Adults Board gave their annual report of 2019-2020 and the strategic plan for 2020 2021. And finally, there was a final report from the Culture and Community Scrutiny Panel, which was about social cohesion and integration. This item was deferred to a further meeting. So we'll move swiftly on to item 9, which is the last one. Do we have any urgent items anyone wishes to raise? There are none. There's only one that I would like to mention, and at yesterday's executive meeting, our final report of the Teesside crematorium was approved. It was well received by the executive. There was 4 recommendations, and 2 are already into play. One was to allow direct cremations to operate at Teesside crematorium. This was introduced earlier in the month. The royal curtains will be installed by the end of January. The review of the car parking arrangements will be undertaken and hopefully completed by June 2021. And as I say, the executive were particularly pleased that we've asked for a biannual update on the income of the Teesside crematorium. So I'd like to say well done to the panel members. Well done. This proves that Scrutiny does work well within Middlesbrough Council. And thanks to Sue as well for her input. She always comes up with excellent recommendations, as everyone knows, but thanks to the panel as well. So with that, I would like to thank everyone for attending, their time, the contributions made at today's meeting. I'd like to thank our fantastic team at Democratic Services, which is Sue, Joe and Scott. Without them, these meetings wouldn't be possible. And we'll see you all again on the 23rd of February. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chair.
Thanks,
Thank
Chair.
you.